The ancient crystal walls of the throne chamber pulsed with ethereal light as Emperor Valdris reviewed the latest intelligence reports from the Outer Rim territories, his pale fingers drumming against the armrest of his magnificent seat that had been carved from a single piece of living starstone 3 millennia ago. The report spoke of a minor species that had somehow managed to achieve faster-than-light travel, despite existing in complete isolation for countless generations, a feat that should have been impossible for such primitive beings according to every scientific model. The Dominion possessed, Admiral Corvin stood before the Emperor with his hands clasped behind his back, his scarred face bearing the expression of someone who had witnessed the destruction of entire civilizations without losing a moment of sleep. Your Imperial Majesty, these humans are nothing more than scavengers who have stumbled upon some abandoned technology from a dead civilization, Corvin declared with absolute certainty, his voice echoing through the vast chamber like thunder rolling across distant mountains. They possess perhaps 30 crewed vessels at most, barely capable of interplanetary travel, let alone posing any threat to our glorious empire. The Emperor leaned forward slightly, his ancient eyes glowing with the same ethereal light that emanated from the wall surrounding them. And yet they refuse our standard offer of peaceful integration into our empire, Valdris mused, his voice carrying the weight of ages and the authority of one who had crushed 1,000 rebellions before these humans had even discovered fire. The Admiral's expression grew even more contemptuous as he spoke of the human response to their diplomatic overture. They transmitted a message consisting primarily of crude insults and what our linguists believe to be obscene gestures directed toward your divine person, Corvin reported with obvious disgust. These creatures clearly lack the intelligence to recognize their betters when presented with the opportunity for peaceful submission. Emperor Valdris rose from his throne with fluid grace, his robes flowing around him like liquid mercury as he approached the massive viewing portal that showed the endless expanse of space beyond. Then they shall serve as an example to any other species that might harbor similar delusions of independence, the Emperor declared, his words carrying the finality of a death sentence. Deploy 5 patrol cruisers to their pathetic little system and demonstrate the futility of resisting our righteous authority. Meanwhile, across the vast gulf of space, President Williams sat in the emergency session of the United Earth Defense Council, surrounded by the most brilliant minds humanity had to offer in the fields of military strategy, xenobiology, and advanced technology. General Hayes spread the translated alien transmission across the holographic display table, his weathered face grim as he outlined the contents for the assembled leaders. The message is quite clear in its intent, Hayes began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was reporting. We have exactly 7 Earth days to surrender unconditionally to what they call the Galactic Dominion Empire, or they will, quote, cleanse our system of the infection of rebellion, end quote. Dr. Anderson, the Council's chief scientist, leaned forward in her chair as she studied the technical aspects of the alien communication. The transmission itself demonstrates technology that surpasses our current capabilities by several orders of magnitude, she reported with characteristic scientific precision. The fact that they were able to penetrate our communication networks and deliver this message simultaneously to every major population center on Earth suggests a level of technological sophistication that we should not underestimate. President Williams looked around the table at the faces of humanity's leaders, seeing determination mixed with the natural fear that came from facing the unknown. What are our military capabilities compared to this empire? She asked, though from the expression on General Hayes's face, she suspected she already knew the answer would not be encouraging. Our space defense fleet consists of 37 vessels of various classes, all equipped with the most advanced weapons and defensive systems our technology can produce, Hayes replied with professional honesty. However, we have no combat experience against alien technology, and their transmission indicates they have conquered hundreds of other species across the galaxy. The silence in the room stretched for several long moments as each member of the council contemplated the implications of their situation. Secretary Chen broke the silence with a question that everyone was thinking but no one wanted to voice. Is there any possibility of negotiating with these aliens? Perhaps finding some middle ground that would allow humanity to maintain its independence while acknowledging their authority in some limited fashion. General Hayes shook his head slowly, his expression growing even more serious. Based on the linguistic analysis of their communication, their culture appears to recognize only two states of existence: complete dominion or total annihilation, he explained. There is no indication that they have ever accepted anything resembling a compromise or negotiated settlement with any species they have encountered. President Williams stood up from her chair and walked to the large window overlooking the sprawling metropolis below, where billions of human beings were going about their daily lives, unaware that their entire species faced extinction within the next week. Then we have no choice but to prepare for war against an enemy that has conquered most of the known galaxy, she said quietly, her reflection in the window showing the weight of responsibility that rested on her shoulders. The vote was unanimous, though each member of the council understood they were likely signing humanity's death warrant by choosing to fight rather than surrender. As the council session ended and the leaders departed to begin preparations for what might be humanity's final battle, General Hayes remained behind to study the tactical data they had managed to extract from the alien transmission. The enemy ships detected by their deep space sensors were massive, each one easily 10 times larger than humanity's largest vessel, and equipped with energy weapons that could probably reduce entire cities to ash within minutes. Yet as Hayes studied the enemy formation and approach vectors, he began to notice something that gave him the first glimmer of hope he had felt since this crisis began. The alien fleet was advancing in a pattern that suggested complete confidence in their superiority, with no attempt at tactical maneuvering or defensive positioning. They were coming straight at Earth like predators approaching prey they considered helpless, which meant they had either never encountered serious resistance before, or they had grown so accustomed to easy victories that they had forgotten how to fight against an enemy that would actually fight back. Hayes began to smile for the first time in hours as he realized that humanity's reputation for stubborn defiance might actually work in their favor against an enemy that expected immediate surrender. The aliens were about to learn that humans had spent their entire history fighting wars against other humans, and they had gotten very good at killing things that wanted to kill them. As he began drafting orders for the deployment of humanity's fleet, Hayes could only hope that their experience in warfare would somehow compensate for their disadvantage in technology and numbers. The silence of deep space was broken by the emergence of 5 massive vessels that materialized at the edge of humanity's solar system, with an arrogant display of advanced technology that sent ripples of gravitational distortion across millions of kilometers. Captain Darius stood in the command center of his flagship, the Star Render, watching with amusement as his sensors detected the primitive defensive arrangements that the humans had constructed around their pathetic little planet. "Look at this pathetic display," he announced to his bridge crew, gesturing toward the tactical display that showed 30 small vessels arranged in what appeared to be some sort of defensive formation. These creatures actually believe their crude metal boxes can stand against the might of the Dominion Empire. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Vale, studied the sensor readings with professional interest, though she shared her captain's confidence in their inevitable victory. "Sir, their vessels appear to be constructed primarily of refined metals and ceramic composites." She reported no evidence of energy shielding or plasma weapon systems, though they do seem to have some sort of projectile launch mechanisms. Captain Darius laughed heartily at this information, the sound echoing through the bridge like the roar of a predator that had cornered its prey. "Projectile weapons," he repeated, with obvious amusement. "These primitives are planning to throw rocks at us while we incinerate their world with plasma fire hot enough to boil oceans." The communication console chimed with an incoming transmission from the human fleet, and Darius gestured for his communications officer to open the channel. "Unknown vessels. This is Commander Roberts of the United Earth Defense Fleet," came the voice through the speakers, speaking in the crude human language that their translation systems had barely managed to decode. "You have entered our solar system without permission and issued threats against our people. You have 60 seconds to reverse course and leave our space." The alien bridge crew erupted in laughter at the audacity of this demand, as if insects were threatening to sting a giant, humans of the third planet. Darius replied through the communication system, his voice dripping with condescension. I am Captain Darius of the Galactic Dominion Empire, and I offer you one final opportunity to surrender unconditionally and accept integration into our glorious civilization." The response came without any hesitation or delay. "This is our answer," Commander Roberts transmitted back. "Come and take." The human fleet began to move with a coordination that surprised Captain Darius. As the 30 vessels broke formation and began accelerating toward his much larger force with what appeared to be reckless abandon. "They're actually attacking us," Lieutenant Vale reported with disbelief in her voice. "Sir, are they completely insane?" Captain Darius studied the tactical display with growing amusement as the human ships approached at velocities that seemed impressive for such primitive technology. "Charge the plasma cannons and prepare to give these creatures a demonstration of real power," he ordered, settling back in his command chair to enjoy what would surely be a brief and one-sided engagement. The massive alien vessels began to glow with internal energy as their weapon systems charged, each ship capable of generating enough destructive force to eliminate entire cities with a single coordinated salvo. Yet as the first plasma bolts streaked across space toward their targets, something impossible happened that made Captain Darius's confident smile disappear entirely. The human ships didn't just evade the incoming fire, they seemed to anticipate exactly where each shot would be aimed before the weapons were even fired, moving in patterns that defied conventional tactical doctrine. "How are they predicting our targeting solutions?" Vale demanded, her voice rising, with confusion and the first hint of genuine concern. Before Captain Darius could respond, the human counterattack began with a series of brief flashes from the human vessels that seemed almost anticlimactic compared to the spectacular plasma display his own ships had produced. "Sir, they're firing some sort of kinetic projectiles," the weapons officer reported. "Metallic slugs accelerated by magnetic fields to approximately 90% of light speed." The captain's expression changed from amusement to alarm as he realized the implications of what he was hearing. 90% light speed, he repeated, his voice losing its confident tone. "Full power to forward shields, emergency evasive maneuvers." But the Star Render was a massive vessel designed for intimidation and overwhelming firepower rather than agility, and the relativistic projectiles were traveling far too fast for conventional evasion tactics. The first tungsten penetrator struck the ship's forward shields with the kinetic energy of a small asteroid, and Captain Darius watched in horror as his supposedly impenetrable defenses simply ceased to exist under the impact. The projectile punched through the ship's hull plating like it was made of paper, venting atmosphere and debris into space while simultaneously destroying 3 primary weapon batteries and the main sensor array. "Impossible," Darius gasped as damage reports flooded in from all sections of his ship. "Our shields are designed to stop any known form of attack." Lieutenant Vale was frantically working at her console, trying to make sense of the sensor data. "Sir, the humans are using pure kinetic energy rather than directed energy weapons," she reported. "Our defensive systems are calibrated to deflect plasma and particle beams, not solid projectiles moving at relativistic velocities." The second human salvo arrived before Captain Darius could even begin to formulate a response strategy, and this time multiple ships had concentrated their fire on a single target. The Star Render's sister ship, the Void Cleaver, simply disintegrated under the combined impact of 6 tungsten rods that struck within microseconds of each other, creating a chain reaction that consumed the entire vessel in a brilliant explosion. "All ships, emergency retreat," Captain Darius ordered, his voice cracking with panic as he realized that his supposedly easy conquest had turned into a nightmare. "Return to base immediately and report that we have encountered organized resistance." But the human ships had anticipated this reaction as well, and they had positioned themselves to intercept any attempt at retreat while continuing their methodical destruction of the Dominion fleet. The engagement that Captain Darius had expected to last mere minutes stretched on for over an hour as the human forces systematically destroyed or crippled 4 of his 5 vessels, using tactics that seemed impossible for such a primitive species. When the Star Render finally managed to escape the solar system with critical damage to most of its primary systems, Captain Darius found himself trying to compose a report that would explain how the most powerful empire in galactic history had just been defeated by creatures who had barely learned to leave their own planet. The transmission he eventually sent to Admiral Corvin would be remembered as the first crack in the Dominion's facade of invincibility, though neither he nor his superiors yet understood the full implications of what had just occurred in that distant system. As the damaged alien vessel limped away into hyperspace, Commander Roberts stood on the bridge of his flagship surveying the debris field that marked humanity's first victory against an interstellar empire. "Signal all ships to begin salvage operations," he ordered. "I want every piece of alien technology recovered and analyzed, because if they sent 5 ships this time, they'll send 50 next time." The wreckage floating in space represented more than just destroyed enemy vessels. It was proof that the supposedly invincible Galactic Dominion Empire could bleed, and more importantly, it was humanity's first glimpse into the technology they would need to understand if they hoped to survive what was coming. The emergency klaxon echoed through the corridors of the Imperial command ship as Admiral Corvin reviewed the impossible report that Captain Darius had somehow managed to transmit before his vessel suffered complete communication failure. 4 ships destroyed or disabled by primitive projectile weapons. Corvin read aloud to his assembled staff officers, his voice heavy with disbelief and growing rage. "This has to be some sort of elaborate deception or technical malfunction in our sensor systems." Commander Nash, his chief tactical analyst, stood rigidly at attention while presenting the verified sensor logs that had been recovered from the battle site. "Sir, we have confirmed debris signatures consistent with the destruction of 4 Dominion vessels," Nash reported with obvious reluctance. "The energy signatures match our standard hull compositions, and the wreckage patterns are consistent with high-velocity, kinetic impacts." Admiral Corvin slammed his fist against the tactical display table, sending holographic projections flickering as his anger overwhelmed his usual professional composure. 50 ships, he declared with cold fury. "I want 50 of our finest vessels prepared for immediate deployment to this human system, and I will personally oversee the complete annihilation of every living thing on that pathetic rock they call home." Meanwhile, in the underground laboratories beneath the ruins of Geneva, Dr. Lee worked frantically alongside teams of humanity's brightest scientists to analyze the alien technology they had salvaged from the destroyed Dominion vessels. "The metallurgy is actually less sophisticated than our current industrial standards," she announced to the assembled researchers, holding up a piece of alien hull plating that gleamed with an oily rainbow sheen. "How is that possible?" asked Professor Kim from the Advanced Materials Division. "These ships traveled between star systems and demonstrated energy weapons far beyond our current capabilities." Dr. Lee activated a holographic display that showed the molecular structure of the alien materials in 3-dimensional detail. "They achieve superior performance through brute force rather than elegant engineering," she explained. "Their hulls are, simply thicker and their power systems are larger. But the underlying technology is actually quite primitive compared to what we've developed out of necessity." The implications of this discovery sent ripples of excitement and hope through the research teams as they realized what this meant for humanity's chances of survival. "Their shields are designed to deflect energy weapons using massive power consumption," Dr. Lee continued. "But they have no defense against kinetic projectiles because they've apparently never encountered an enemy that used such primitive weapons." General Hayes received the scientific report while standing in the new command center that had been hastily constructed in the asteroid belt, surrounded by the fruits of humanity's crash militarization program. "So you're telling me that our main advantage is that we're too primitive for them to defend against," he said with grim humor as he studied the tactical projections. "More precisely, our advantage is that we've had to develop efficient solutions to every engineering problem we've ever faced," Dr. Lee replied through the communication link. "While they've had the luxury of overwhelming their enemies with raw power, we've learned to make every resource count." The general nodded thoughtfully as he considered the strategic implications of this information. "Then we need to make sure they never get the chance to adapt their defenses to counter our weapons," Hayes concluded. "How long before those automated platforms are ready?" The answer came from Chief Engineer Adams, whose teams had been working around the clock to construct humanity's most ambitious defensive project. The magnetic accelerator platforms are 90% complete, Adams reported, 200 installations hidden throughout the asteroid belt, each one capable of launching tungsten projectiles at near light speeds. General Hayes smiled grimly as he reviewed the tactical display, showing the positioning of their hidden weapons. And they're powered by fusion reactors that have been charging for weeks, Adams continued. When Admiral Corvin arrives with his fleet, he's going to fly directly into the most concentrated crossfire in human history. The alien fleet emerged from hyperspace exactly where human intelligence had predicted. 50 massive vessels arranged in the traditional Dominion formation designed to intimidate enemies into immediate surrender. Admiral Corvin stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Imperial Fist, studying the tactical display that showed the human fleet had actually left their defensive positions around Earth and was advancing to meet his superior force. "These creatures are even more foolish than I thought," Corvin declared to his staff. "They're abandoning the only defensive advantage they possess to fight us in open space, where our superior numbers and firepower will crush them completely." What the Admiral didn't realize was that the human fleet's advance was carefully calculated to draw his ships into the optimal position for the trap that had been prepared for them. All ships maintain formation and advance to engagement range. Corvin ordered, "I want these humans to see the full might of the Dominion Empire before we reduce them to cosmic dust." The massive alien vessels moved forward with stately precision, their hulls gleaming with the same arrogant confidence that had carried them to victory against hundreds of other species throughout the galaxy at exactly the moment when the Dominion fleet reached the coordinates that General Hayes had designated as the killing zone. 200 hidden platforms throughout the asteroid belt opened fire simultaneously. The combined salvo of relativistic projectiles created a storm of tungsten that converged on the alien formation from every possible angle, making evasion impossible even for smaller and more maneuverable vessels. Admiral Corvin watched in horror as his flagship's sensors detected incoming projectiles that were already too close to avoid, traveling at speeds that made defensive countermeasures completely useless. "Emergency shields all power to defensive systems," he screamed. But his crew's frantic efforts were utterly futile against the mathematics of the trap they had sailed into. The Imperial Fist died, along with 37 other Dominion vessels in the first coordinated salvo, their hulls shredded by projectiles, carrying enough kinetic energy to crack moons. The surviving alien ships found themselves scattered and disoriented, facing an enemy that had demonstrated the ability to coordinate attacks across distances that should have made such precision impossible. Commander Roberts, watching the destruction from his flagship, felt no satisfaction at the carnage they had unleashed. "Signal the surviving alien vessels," he ordered. "Tell them they have 60 seconds to surrender, or we will continue the engagement." The response came from the few Dominion ships that still had functioning communication systems, and it consisted of the same arrogant demands for human submission that had started this entire conflict. "Then they've made their choice," Roberts said quietly. "All platforms, continue firing until no alien vessel remains operational." The second salvo finished what the first had begun, leaving only debris and radiation where Admiral Corvin's mighty fleet had been moments before. As the last alien ship was reduced to scrap metal and venting atmosphere, General Hayes transmitted a message that would be intercepted by Dominion monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. "This is General Hayes of the United Earth Defense Force," he announced. "Any alien force that enters our solar system with hostile intent will be destroyed without mercy or quarter. This is your only warning." The mathematical precision of the trap they had executed sent a clear message to anyone with the intelligence to understand it. Humanity didn't just fight wars, they won them through superior planning and ruthless efficiency. Wreckage floating in space represented more than destroyed ships. It was proof that the Galactic Dominion Empire could be beaten by beings they had dismissed as primitive savages. The crystal spires of the Imperial capital world trembled with seismic activity as Emperor Valdris paced through his private chambers, his advisors maintaining a respectful distance while he processed the catastrophic reports arriving from the human system. 2 fleets, he repeated for the third time, his voice carrying a dangerous edge that had not been heard in centuries. Two entire fleets destroyed by a species that achieved interstellar flight only decades ago. Chief Scientist Nara stood before a massive holographic display that showed the tactical analysis of both engagements, her usually calm demeanor cracked by the implications of what their sensors had recorded. "Your Imperial Majesty, the humans are not simply using advanced technology," she reported with scientific precision that did little to soften the devastating nature of her conclusions. "They are demonstrating tactical coordination and strategic planning that suggests a level of military sophistication we have never encountered." The Emperor stopped his pacing and fixed his ancient gaze upon the chief scientist, his eyes glowing with the same ethereal light that had once reduced entire worlds to submission. "Explain to me how creatures who have never left their own star system can defeat officers who have conquered dozens of civilizations," Valdris demanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Nara activated a series of tactical recordings that showed the human fleet movements during both engagements, the holographic displays revealing patterns of coordination that seemed almost impossible. "Every human vessel appears to be operating as part of a single coordinated entity," she explained. "Their ships move in perfect synchronization across distances that should make such coordination impossible with any known technology." Minister Devon, the Emperor's chief military advisor, stepped forward with obvious reluctance to present his own analysis of the human capabilities. "Our intelligence suggests that these humans have spent their entire existence engaged in warfare against members of their own species," Devon reported. "Their military doctrine has been refined through constant conflict, rather than theoretical exercises." Emperor Valdris absorbed this information with growing unease as he began to understand the true nature of the threat these humans represented. "You are telling me that an entire species has dedicated itself to perfecting the art of war," he said, quietly. "While our forces have grown complacent through easy victories against inferior enemies." The implications of this realization sent ripples of fear through the assembled advisors as they comprehended what it meant for the future of their empire. Meanwhile, in the hidden shipyards of Luna, President Williams walked through vast construction bays where humanity's response to the alien threat was taking shape in the form of sleek vessels designed with lessons learned from captured Dominion technology. "How many ships will be ready for the next engagement?" she asked Admiral Roberts, who had been promoted following his victories against the alien fleets. 60 vessels of the new Defender class will be operational within 2 weeks, Roberts replied, each one incorporating hybrid technology that combines our kinetic weapons with adapted alien power systems. The new ships represented a fusion of human engineering efficiency with alien technological capability, creating vessels that were both faster and more deadly than anything either civilization had produced independently. "And our intelligence on the Empire's capabilities?" Williams inquired as they observed the construction of humanity's first true battle fleet. "Analysis of their communication intercepts suggests they have over 10,000 vessels at their disposal," Roberts reported grimly. "But most of those ships are designed for intimidation rather than actual combat against a prepared enemy." The president studied the technical specifications of their new warships, noting the elegant simplicity of the human design philosophy applied to alien technology. "Our advantage is that we've designed these ships specifically to fight the Dominion Empire," Roberts continued. "While their vessels are built to overwhelm multiple different types of enemies, ours have been optimized for one purpose only." As if summoned by their discussion of Imperial capabilities, the long-range sensors detected massive gravitational disturbances at the edge of the solar system that indicated the arrival of another alien fleet. "How many ships?" Williams asked, though she suspected from Roberts's expression that the answer would not be encouraging. 200 vessels, Roberts replied, led by the Imperial Wrath, which our intelligence identifies as Grand Admiral Theron's personal flagship. The president felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders as she realized that humanity was about to face its greatest test. Yet Grand Admiral Theron is Emperor Valdris's brother, Roberts explained. "If they're sending him personally, it means they're taking this threat seriously for the first time." Williams nodded grimly as she considered the implications of facing the Empire's most experienced commander. Then we need to make sure this is the last fleet they ever send to our system, she declared. Signal all vessels to prepare for departure. We're going to meet them in deep space before they can threaten Earth directly. The human fleet that departed Earth's orbital shipyards represented the culmination of everything their species had learned about warfare during their brief but violent encounter with the Galactic Dominion Empire. 60 vessels moved in perfect formation toward the edge of the solar system, each one a deadly fusion of human tactical doctrine and alien technology, crewed by beings who had never known defeat because they had never considered surrender as an option. Grand Admiral Theron watched their approach from the bridge of his massive flagship, studying the tactical display with professional interest, rather than the casual arrogance that had doomed his predecessors. These humans are advancing to meet us rather than defending their homeworld. He observed to his senior staff. They either possess complete confidence in their abilities, or they are desperate enough to risk everything on a single engagement. The alien commander had studied the tactical recordings from the previous battles, and unlike his subordinates, he had recognized the sophisticated planning that had gone into both human victories. "Sir, should we attempt to negotiate with these creatures?" his tactical officer suggested. "Perhaps we could offer them some sort of autonomous status within the Empire." Theron considered this suggestion carefully before shaking his head. "Look at their formation and approach vector," he replied. "These are not beings who are interested in compromise. They are predators who have decided that we represent a threat to their survival." As the two fleets converged in the darkness between worlds, both commanders understood that this engagement would determine the future relationship between humanity and the Galactic Dominion Empire. The Emperor himself monitored the battle through real-time communication links, knowing that the outcome would either restore Imperial prestige or shatter the illusion of invincibility that held his vast empire together. For the first time in over 1,000 years, a Dominion fleet was entering battle against an enemy that had already proven capable of destroying their forces, and neither side was certain of the outcome. The vast emptiness between worlds became a battlefield, as two fundamentally different philosophies of warfare prepared to test their effectiveness against each other in the ultimate arena of survival. Grand Admiral Theron stood in the command center of the Imperial Wrath, a vessel so massive that small cities could have fit within its cargo bays, watching as his sensors tracked the approaching human fleet with professional interest. 60 vessels against 200, his tactical officer reported with obvious confidence. Even accounting for their unconventional weapons, the mathematics of this engagement heavily favor our forces. The Grand Admiral studied the holographic display showing both fleets' positions and vectors, noting the precise formation that the human ships maintained despite the vast distances involved. "Never underestimate an enemy who has already demonstrated the ability to destroy your forces," Theron replied grimly. "These humans have proven they can coordinate attacks with precision that defies our understanding of battlefield communications." As the fleets closed to engagement range, the human vessels suddenly broke formation in a maneuver that seemed to violate every principle of conventional space warfare. Instead of maintaining their defensive arrangement, the human ships scattered into small groups that began moving in three-dimensional patterns, too complex for the Imperial tactical computers to predict or counter. "What are they doing?" demanded Captain Ross from his position at the weapons console. "Their formation has completely dissolved. They're presenting us with isolated targets." Admiral Roberts stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as his carefully planned strategy began to unfold exactly as humanity's war planners had predicted. "All ships, implement swarm doctrine," he commanded through the quantum communication network that linked every human vessel. "Remember, we're not trying to match their firepower. We're going to use their size against them." The human fleet had been designed and trained to fight like a pack of wolves rather than a traditional naval formation, with each ship capable of independent action, while maintaining perfect coordination with its companions. Grand Admiral Theron watched in fascination as the human vessels began darting between his massive ships with an agility that seemed impossible for craft of their size. "They're using our own ships as cover," he realized with growing respect for his enemy's tactical acumen. "Our larger vessels cannot fire without risk of hitting each other. The first human attack came from multiple directions simultaneously, as 6 ships focused their combined firepower on a single Imperial cruiser, their tungsten projectiles striking within microseconds of each other. The targeted vessel's shields, designed to withstand sustained energy bombardment, proved useless against the concentrated kinetic assault, and the ship simply disintegrated under the focused impact. All ships, break formation and engage independently, Theron ordered, recognizing that his traditional battle line was actually working against him in this engagement. But the human commanders had anticipated this response as well, and as the Imperial fleet began to scatter, the human ships regrouped into new attack patterns that took advantage of the confusion. Captain Stone led 3 other vessels in a coordinated assault on the Imperial Wrath itself, approaching the massive flagship from angles that made it impossible for the ship's main weapons to target all of them simultaneously. "Sir, multiple human vessels approaching from different vectors," the flagship's defensive coordinator reported. "Our main batteries cannot track targets moving at those velocities while maintaining firing solutions on all of them." Grand Admiral Theron found himself in the unprecedented position of commanding a fleet that was being systematically dismantled by an enemy using tactics that had never been employed against Imperial forces before. "Focus all defensive fire on the lead human vessel," he ordered. "If we can destroy their command ship, their coordination might collapse." But the human fleet had been designed with redundancy in mind, and the loss of individual vessels did not disrupt their overall tactical coordination in the way Theron had hoped. The Imperial Wrath's massive hull began to show the effects of sustained kinetic bombardment as the human ship systematically targeted its weapon systems, engines, and life support infrastructure. "Sir, we've lost primary weapons control," reported the tactical officer. "Hull breaches on decks 15 through 30, and the main reactor is showing signs of instability." Theron realized with growing alarm that his flagship was being methodically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to understand the vulnerabilities of Imperial ship design better than the engineers who had built them. "Emergency transmission to all Imperial forces," he commanded. "The humans are not seeking territorial conquest, they are attempting to completely destroy our military capabilities." The battle raged for hours as the human fleet demonstrated a level of tactical flexibility that had never been seen in galactic warfare before. Each time the Imperial forces adapted to one human tactic, the enemy ships would shift to a completely different approach, maintaining constant pressure while avoiding the devastating return fire that could have eliminated them. As the Imperial Wrath finally succumbed to the accumulated damage from dozens of kinetic strikes, Grand Admiral Theron's final transmission to the Empire contained a warning that would echo through Imperial command for generations. "These humans do not fight like any enemy we have ever encountered," he reported as his flagship's systems failed around him. "They have turned warfare into a science, and they have studied us far more thoroughly than we have studied them." The destruction of the Imperial fleet sent shockwaves throughout the Galactic Dominion Empire as news of the defeat spread to every corner of their vast territory. For the first time in over a millennium, an Imperial fleet had been completely annihilated by an enemy that had refused to surrender, and the implications of this victory went far beyond the loss of ships and personnel. Admiral Roberts surveyed the debris field that had once been the pride of the Imperial Navy, feeling no satisfaction in the destruction they had unleashed. "Signal Earth Command," he ordered. "The immediate threat has been neutralized, but we need to prepare for the possibility that they'll send their entire fleet next time." The wreckage, floating in space, represented more than just destroyed alien vessels. It was proof that the supposedly invincible Galactic Dominion Empire had fundamental weaknesses that could be exploited by an enemy with sufficient determination and intelligence. As the human fleet began the long journey back to Earth, they carried with them the knowledge that humanity had crossed a line from which there could be no return. They had not just defended their homeworld, they had demonstrated to the entire galaxy that the Empire could be defeated, and that demonstration would have consequences that neither species could fully anticipate. The age of unchallenged Imperial dominance was ending, brought down not by a vast alliance of subjugated species, but by a single world whose inhabitants had refused to kneel. The crystalline throne room that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations now echoed within silence that spoke of fear rather than reverence. As Emperor Valdris sat alone among the shadows of his collapsing empire, reports flooded in from across the galaxy as news of the Imperial fleet's destruction spread like wildfire through communication networks that had carried only victory announcements for over 1,000 years. The humans had not stopped with their defensive triumph, instead pursuing the scattered remnants of Imperial forces to their nearest strongholds and systematically destroying every military installation they encountered. 3 major Imperial fortresses had fallen to human attacks, their supposedly impregnable defenses proving as useless as tissue paper against the relativistic projectiles that had become humanity's signature weapon. "Your Imperial Majesty," Chief Scientist Nara reported with barely concealed terror in her voice. "The humans are not attempting to conquer territory or subjugate our populations. They are methodically eliminating our ability to project military power throughout the Empire." The Emperor studied the tactical displays showing human fleet movements across multiple star systems, noting the surgical precision with which they targeted military assets while leaving civilian infrastructure untouched. "They are demonstrating a level of strategic restraint that we have never shown to our enemies," Valdris observed with the bitter wisdom of someone who had spent millennia crushing opposition through overwhelming brutality. Minister Devon approached the throne with obvious reluctance, carrying reports that would fundamentally change the Emperor's understanding of the threat they faced. "Sire, our intelligence analysis suggests that the humans have compressed millions of years of military evolution into mere centuries through constant warfare among themselves," Devon explained. "Every tactical doctrine they employ has been tested and refined through actual combat, rather than theoretical exercises." The implications of this revelation settled over the throne room like a funeral shroud as the assembled advisors contemplated what it meant for their empire's survival. "You are telling me that these humans have spent their entire civilization perfecting the art of killing," Emperor Valdris said quietly, "while our forces have grown soft through easy victories against beings who surrendered at the first sign of resistance." The Emperor rose from his throne and walked to the massive viewing portal that showed the endless expanse of his domain, knowing that somewhere in that darkness, human warships were systematically dismantling the infrastructure of Imperial power. "How many ships would we need to guarantee victory against these creatures?" he asked, though he suspected the answer would require sacrificing the defense of his core territories. "Our military analysts estimate that complete victory would require deploying 70% of our total fleet," Devon replied, "but doing so would leave the inner systems vulnerable to rebellion from our subjugated species." Emperor Valdris felt the weight of impossible choices settling upon his shoulders as he realized that the humans had achieved something far more devastating than military conquest. They had shattered the illusion of imperial invincibility that held the Galactic Dominion Empire together, and across hundreds of worlds, oppressed species were beginning to stir with the hope of freedom, sire. "We are receiving reports of uprising on 12 different worlds," announced Communications Officer Lane. "The subject species appear to believe that the humans have proven Imperial forces can be defeated." The Emperor closed his ancient eyes as he understood the full magnitude of the catastrophe that had befallen. His realm, a single species from an insignificant world, had not only defeated his fleets but had inspired rebellion throughout an empire that had maintained order through fear alone. "What are our options?" Valdris asked his assembled advisors, knowing that every choice before him led to different forms of disaster. "We can attempt to negotiate with the humans," suggested Minister Devon, "perhaps offering them autonomous status within the Empire in exchange for ceasing their attacks." Chief Scientist Nara shook her head grimly as she presented her analysis of human behavioral patterns. "Based on their actions, negotiation may be impossible," she reported. "These humans appear to view our empire as a threat that must be completely neutralized rather than accommodated." The Emperor considered the possibility that he was facing an enemy that could not be reasoned with, bought off, or intimidated into submission. Meanwhile, Admiral Roberts stood on the bridge of his flagship as it entered orbit around Kronos Prime, the heavily fortified world that served as the Empire's primary military headquarters. "Signal the Imperial Command," he ordered, I want to speak directly with Emperor Valdris. The communication that followed would be remembered as the moment when humanity announced its intentions to the galaxy with absolute clarity. Emperor Valdris, Roberts began, his voice carrying across the vast distances between species and civilizations. We did not seek this conflict, but we will finish it on our terms. The human admiral's image appeared on screens throughout the imperial capital as he delivered humanity's final ultimatum. Withdraw all imperial forces from our space and cease all military operations against human interests, Roberts continued. This is the only offer you will receive, and we will not repeat it. Emperor Valdris found himself in the unprecedented position of receiving demands from a species he had intended to exterminate, and the irony of the situation was not lost on him. And if we refuse, he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer, then we will continue to systematically destroy every imperial military asset we encounter until your empire no longer possesses the capability to threaten anyone. Roberts replied with matter-of-fact precision. The Emperor studied the human admiral's face through the communication link, seeing no trace of bluff or uncertainty in his expression. You realize that such actions would destabilize the entire galaxy, Valdris pointed out. Without imperial authority, hundreds of species would fall into chaos and warfare. Roberts considered this argument for a moment before responding with characteristic human directness. Then perhaps it's time for those species to determine their own destinies rather than living under the boot of an empire that rules through fear and intimidation. Emperor Valdris realized that he was not just negotiating with a military commander, but with representatives of a species that possessed fundamentally different values about freedom and self-determination. The silence stretched between them as the Emperor contemplated choices that would determine the fate of countless worlds and trillions of beings. You have given us much to consider, Valdris finally replied. We will need time to evaluate your proposal. Admiral Roberts nodded acknowledgement of this request while making humanity's position absolutely clear. You have 72 hours to begin the withdrawal of Imperial forces from our space, he stated. After that time, we will resume military operations against all Imperial targets. The communication ended, leaving Emperor Valdris alone with the weight of a decision that would either save his empire through negotiation or doom it to destruction through continued warfare. As he sat in his crystalline throne surrounded by the symbols of power that had once seemed eternal, the Emperor understood that the age of unchallenged imperial dominance was ending. Whether it ended through negotiated withdrawal or complete military defeat would depend on his next words, and for the first time in his long reign, Valdris was genuinely uncertain about which choice would serve his people best. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as humanity waited for an answer that would determine the future of galactic civilization.